Rumpelstiltskin's bargain with the queen is the most infamous deal in fairy tale history. And when he demanded her firstborn child, he wanted something far more sinister than a baby. He needed a curse that required a very specific kind of payment. We all remember the creepy little man who could spin straw into gold. We remember the impossible riddle of his name. But we've forgotten what he truly was. He was a collector, sure, but there is more to the story. As for the queen's child, that innocent baby would become his fuel rather than his son. So here's the question that should haunt us. What ancient power was so great, so terrible, that it demanded the soul of a newborn child as its price? We all know the story. A poor miller's daughter, trapped in a tower by a greedy king. She faces a death sentence for a lie her father told. Then, out of the shadows, a strange little man appears. He performs a miracle, turning worthless straw into shimmering gold. First for a necklace, then for a ring. He saves her life, and she becomes queen. It's a classic rags to riches tale. But of course, there is always a price for magic. A price that must be paid when the magical helper returns for a third and final night of impossible work. But the third night, she has nothing left to give. And the little man makes his final demand. Promise me, when you are queen, your first child. In her terror, she agrees. A year later, he returns to collect his payment. The queen is horrified. She is a mother now, and her perspective has changed completely. She offers him all the wealth of the kingdom, anything he could possibly want. But his reply is one of the most chilling lines in all of folklore. No, something living is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world. This is the moment we remember. A mother's desperate fight to save her baby from a monster. This is the story we were told. But what if Rumpelstiltskin wasn't the only one in that room who saw the child as a bargaining chip? Good versus evil? That's what we think this is. But really, it's a dark transaction in a world with very different rules. A world where a baby was a form of currency alongside life itself. What you need to understand, this tale is more than a story. It is a memory. To understand the real price, we have to look past the grim story and into the shadowy world of ancient European folklore. Long before Rumpelstiltskin had a name, stories were whispered about supernatural beings who craved human children. They were known as the Fae, the good folk, the people of the Hollow Hills. And the babies they stole were often replaced with sickly replicas made of wood or wax. These stolen children were called changelings. For centuries, this was a terrifyingly real fear for new parents. This was far from random cruelty. It was a desperate act of survival. And it's our first clue to a truly shocking truth. Let's go back to the deal. The first thing to notice is the structure of the deal itself. It is a contract, not an act of chaos. It's a series of clear, transactional agreements. Rumpelstiltskin is a magical craftsman who performs a service for an agreed-upon price. The queen, then just a miller's daughter, willingly agrees to his terms not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. The first 2 nights, the exchange is simple. A service for an object, magic for jewelry. But the third night, her payment is a promise. It's a future, a life that doesn't even exist yet. We'd like to believe it is a simple kidnapping plot, but really it's the foreclosure on a supernatural debt. The true horror of the story comes from the queen's delayed realization. She understands, far too late, that in his world, a promise is absolute. She discovers that a child can be used as collateral. But we have to ask ourselves, was she truly an innocent victim? Her own father sold her future to the king for a moment of status. He gambled with her life. Then, faced with death, she turned around and sold her child's future to save herself. She learned the transactional nature of the world from her own family, and she applied the lesson perfectly. Now let's look at our supernatural helper. Who is this creature, really? He is a master of a secret art, the art of transformation. In the ancient world, this was the closest thing to real magic. Blacksmiths and metalworkers who could turn dull, heavy ore into shining, useful metal were seen as magicians. They were powerful figures who held secret knowledge passed down through generations. The same was true for weavers who could turn coarse, straw-like flax into fine golden linen thread. They were masters of a mysterious process. Rumpelstiltskin is the ultimate mythological craftsman. He takes the most worthless material imaginable, dead, dry straw, and transforms it into the most valuable substance on Earth. But his incredible power isn't free. It operates on a fundamental law of exchange. Great creation requires great sacrifice. On the surface, his demand looks like a whim or a flash of greed. The reality is that it was the fundamental law of his magic. The question we need to ask is, what was he trying to create that was even more valuable to him than all the gold in the world? Because that is the key to understanding his final, terrible price. The story never tells us what he planned to do with the baby. And that silence is deafening. Our minds rush to fill in the blanks with the most terrible images we can imagine. And that is by design. This ambiguity is itself a powerful clue. It allows the story to carry the weight of much older, darker tales. In many ancient myths and legends from around the world, when a supernatural being demands a child, it is rarely to raise as their own. It is to consume their life force. To use their untainted, innocent soul as a power source, or even more chillingly, to pay a debt to an even darker, more powerful entity. The story's silence on this point is what makes it so terrifying. It's what allows the true, ancient horror of the Firstborn Curse to echo through the ages. While we want to believe it's about one monster's plan, it truly concerns a universal fear of what the darkness wants with our children. The story doesn't need to give us the details, because deep down, our cultural memory already knows them. Finally, we have the queen's only escape. She must learn his true name. This is a rule so old it predates written history. We see it everywhere, in ancient magical texts, in religious exorcisms, and in countless folklore traditions. To know a creature's true name is to have power over it. It is the key to binding it or banishing it. This single rule confirms something crucial. Rumpelstiltskin is from another world entirely. He is a being from another world, an elemental spirit bound by ancient magical laws. And like all powerful beings, he has a weakness. His power is tied to his secrecy, his identity. The fact that he can be defeated by knowledge, by a single word, tells us everything we need to know. He belongs to an old world of spirits and shadows, a world with its own strange needs, its own dark economy, and a very specific and very desperate demand for something that only humanity can provide. We begin our excavation with the Fae. In the folklore of Ireland, Scotland, and much of Northern Europe, the greatest fear for new parents was the changeling. The stories are remarkably consistent. A beautiful, healthy human baby would be stolen from its cradle in the night. In its place, the Fae would leave a sickly, crying replica. Sometimes it was a grotesque Fae infant. Other times, it was just an enchanted piece of wood made to look like a child. You might think this was an act of simple malice, yet the terrifying truth behind this myth was actually desperation. Many folklore scholars believe these stories encoded a tragic, ancient belief. The Fae were a dying race. They were often imagined as being immortal, living forever in a timeless land. But that immortality came at a price. They were believed to be sterile, or that their own children were born weak and sickly, unable to survive. They looked at the human world with envy. They saw us as vibrant, fertile, and full of life. They needed to steal human children for the most fundamental reason of all, to survive. They needed to infuse their fading bloodlines with human vitality. They needed heirs who could grow and change in their timeless, stagnant world. And the firstborn child, seen as the strongest and most vital of the family line, was the ultimate prize. We call Rumpelstiltskin a goblin, though he is actually a memory of that desperate ancient need. But the Fae's need for our children was sometimes even darker than that. Some of the oldest folkloric traditions speak of a terrible tribute. They state that the Fae were themselves vassals to a greater, more sinister power, and they were forced to pay a tithe to hell every 7 years. This tithe was a sacrifice of one of their own to the underworld to maintain their magic and their kingdom. But the Fae were clever. To save their own kind from this fate, they would kidnap the most beautiful, healthy human children they could find. And they would pay their terrible price with our sons and daughters instead of their own. This idea casts Rumpelstiltskin in a completely new light. He is a solitary creature, so he wouldn't be paying a tithe for a kingdom. He would be paying a tithe for his own immense power. The child he demanded from the queen was never going to be his. It was going to be traded away. It was payment on a debt to something far, far worse. This is the Firstborn Curse in its most terrifying form. A child's life used to pay a demon's debt. It transforms the story from a simple tale of greed into a horrifying glimpse of a supernatural economy, where human souls are the ultimate currency. Now let's pull back from the world of myth and into a surprising reality. In the medieval world, the firstborn bargain was a real and surprisingly common practice. While no magic was involved, the practice did mean giving up a child forever. It was common for a struggling family to promise their firstborn son as an apprentice to a master craftsman. This was done in exchange for money, the forgiveness of a debt or a favor. This child, sometimes as young as 7, would leave their family and go to live with the master. They would become part of the craftsman's household, and in exchange for years of labor, they would learn a valuable and often secret trade. This historical reality provides a stunningly plausible skeleton for our myth. It grounds the fantastic story in a real-world transaction. In this light, Rumpelstiltskin becomes the ultimate master craftsman of magic. He holds the secret to an impossible art. And the queen, desperate for his service, makes a deal. We assume he was stealing a baby out of malice. In truth, he was claiming his apprentice. The agreed-upon price for sharing his secret art of creating wealth and saving her life. The fairy tale takes a very real human transaction and cloaks it in the supernatural. And now we arrive at the final, deepest layer of the excavation. The piece that makes the entire puzzle click into place. What was the secret art he was truly practicing? The work on the surface was spinning, but his real craft was alchemy, the ancient mystical tradition of transformation. The famous goal of the alchemist was, of course, to turn base metals like lead into pure gold. But this was only the surface-level goal. The true, ultimate ambition of the most serious alchemists went far beyond creating gold. Their real dream was to create life. This theoretical, artificially created human was called a homunculus. The forbidden texts that describe its creation are bizarre and often horrifying. They speak of strange distillations, occult processes, and magical incantations. But many interpretations of these dark recipes agree on one central, terrifying idea. To create a new life in a flask, the alchemist required the essence of an existing one. The process needed a catalyst. It needed a spark of pure, untainted life force. And the most powerful source of this life force was believed to be the soul of a firstborn child. This is the ultimate revelation of our investigation. We thought he wanted to raise a child. Yet Rumpelstiltskin's demand was for an entirely different purpose. He was an alchemist. Spinning straw into gold was merely his proof of concept. It was the flashy demonstration he used to prove his power. But his true, ultimate aim was to use the queen's baby as the final, terrible ingredient to achieve the alchemist's darkest and most forbidden dream, the power to create a soul from scratch. So, the Firstborn Curse? It's woven from 3 distinct and terrifying threads. First, there is the mythic thread. This is the ancient, desperate need of the dying Fae, who saw our children as their only hope for survival in a fading world. Their story is a tragedy of immortality and envy. Then there is the historical thread. This is the real-world, medieval practice of trading a firstborn son as an apprentice. A child who was literally given up to learn a master's secrets and would never return home. It's a story of poverty, sacrifice, and the high price of knowledge. And finally, there is the occult thread. This is the dark and terrifying ambition of the alchemist, who believed that the purest life force, the soul of a firstborn child, was the key to unlocking the very secrets of creation itself. A story of hubris and forbidden science. Rumpelstiltskin is the terrifying fusion of all 3. He is the Fae creature desperate for new life. He is the magical craftsman claiming his rightful apprentice. And he is the dark alchemist demanding the final component for his great work. The baby was never the goal. The baby was the price of power. Rumpelstiltskin's Firstborn Curse is a chilling example of a myth born from ancient ritual. This curse represents one level in a much deeper, darker world. Some fairy tales hide history. Others hide psychological truth. And the darkest ones are warnings. There are 7 levels of dark fairy tale origins. To begin your descent, click the video on your screen now.